good afternoon again, 1:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are here for part 2 of probably part 6, 8, or 10. I'm not really sure exactly how many it will be of the reading of the story of Cesar Milstein and monoclonal antibodies. I'm your host, Mark Kulak, and as I go through these, what's great is we can then put together a playlist. So just have a little bit more time to do a second reading today. And once I get the playlist started, then I can just add to them on all the different platforms. So with that said, let us just add this too. We just went to go visit a few different, let's just say, care centers. And got back. I think we found one that works. That's good news. That's good news. And we had to go to quite a few. a lot of bad apples out there, but I think we found a good one. So with that said, hello, Rock Girl. Hello. End of Days Prophecy. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just reading. Okay. As I've said to some people, and I'm not going to apologize for this. I need some layups right now. We have a ton of content. We have a ton of research over the last 4 years. We're just busy right now. So you're going to see me. I may not slow down on the number of videos, but there's going to be a lot of readings. I need some layups just to keep things moving forward. This article here we found a month or two ago. I don't know when it was. And it's so rich. Anyways. We'll start the playlist. We'll put it together after this, and it's probably going to take about 6 or 8 episodes to read all of these. So let's get going. Again, this is part 2 of the story of Cesar Milstein and monoclonal antibodies. It's 1:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, October 5th. Milstein's Cesar, I'm saying Cesar Milstein's early life. The journey from Argentina. The son of Jewish immigrants, Cesar Milstein grew up in Bahia Blanca, a port town located by the Atlantic Ocean some 500 miles south of Buenos Aires. Jews had begun to settle in Bahia Blanca from around 1900, many of them coming from Central and Eastern Europe. So this is one of those situations where, if you don't mind, we just have to go to... just have to go to Google. I want to see where this is on a map. And I'm probably mispronouncing it. So you can see it's on the Atlantic Ocean. Nice big bay. And how far south? Whoa, it is the southern tip of Argentina. Wow, that's a cool area. You go, I don't know how many miles to the east. And, well, it's maybe not the absolute furthest south, but it's pretty far south. I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, being up in New England. That's in this area here. So it looks like it's probably about 400 miles, 500 miles north of the southernmost area, or at least of the Falklands, I'm gonna guess. So just a point of reference here. I was just curious about that. Many of them coming from Central and Eastern Europe. Milstein's father, Lazaro, was born in a village in the Ukraine. And why do I say Ukraine? The Ukraine. Why not just Ukraine? But anyways, Milstein's father, Lazaro, was born in a village in the Ukraine and migrated to Argentina in 1913 at the age of 14 with his aged aunt and uncle. For many years, he lived in Jewish settlements near Bahia Blanca, trying his hand at different trades, including farm labor, carpentry, and railway work. During this time, he taught himself Spanish and was an enthusiastic reader. He was also active in social and cultural activities, helping preserve Yiddish literature and working for non-religious Jewish organizations, some with anarcho syndicalist connections. I'm not sure what that is. Anarcho-syndicalist connections. I have some people in my audience who are very much into studying Jewish history, so you will probably know that off immediately. This is a photograph was taken of Milstein when he was Cesar Milstein when he was young. Lazaro, Milstein's father, met Maxima, his wife-to-be, in Bahia Blanca. Maxima was born in Argentina. She was the daughter of poor Ukrainian immigrants and made great sacrifices to ensure she had a secondary school education and went to college. At the time Lazaro met Maxima, she was a school teacher. Soon after their meeting, Maxima rose to become a headmistress. From 1926 to 1933, Maxima directed School Number 3, the first co-educational school established in Bahia Blanca. Milstein, the middle of three brothers, Cesar Milstein, was born at the family's home in this school's premises, on this school's premises. He also attended the school in his early childhood. Both of Milstein's parents spoke Yiddish at home, but Milstein was raised speaking only Spanish. During his early childhood, Milstein preferred playing with other children in the streets to reading books. With his mother's encouragement, however, he soon began to find pleasure in books, particularly adventure stories such as Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. Cesar Milstein developed a desire to pursue science at the early age of 8. This was prompted by a discussion he had with one of his cousins, who had just completed her degree in chemistry and was then working as a biochemist at the Instituto Malbran, M-A-L-B-R-A-N. Milstein was particularly fascinated by his cousin's description of her attempts to extract snake venom to treat snake bite victims. This narrator's note. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's just... Did that many people really get bitten by snakes? I mean, I know there are pests and all, but... Anyways, we know that the whole snake venom story was, or narrative was put out there, coinciding with research into remdesivir. I'm not going to comment any further on it, but it is interesting that that story was recently put out there. And Milstein was particularly fascinated by his cousin's description of her attempts to extract snake venom to treat snake bites. Continuing. Cesar Milstein's interest in science deepened when on his 9th birthday he was given a Spanish translation of Paul de Kruif's, that's K-R-U-I-F, Microbe Hunters, it's a title, by his mother, Maxima Milstein. The book awakened his desire to have the same type of adventurous life like that of other scientists, Antoni van Leeuwenhoek and Louis Pasteur, described in the book. Cesar Milstein grew up in a family which prized knowledge and education. Until his last year of school, Milstein attended schools close to home in Bahia Blanca, including the Colegio Nacional. I presume that's the National College in Argentina. In his final year, however, he moved to a secondary school in Buenos Aires to prepare for the entrance exam of the University of Buenos Aires. Milstein's parents always supported his research, his mother helping to type up his first PhD thesis and his father offering him economic assistance so that he could dedicate himself to his doctoral research. Fiercely independent, Cesar Milstein declined his father's financial support. Next section is education. In 1945, Cesar Milstein started to study chemistry at the University of Buenos Aires. His undergraduate studies, however, were interrupted when, during a faculty picnic, he suffered severe injuries to his pancreas when he hit a log while diving into a shallow pool and had to take off some time to recover. He finally received his Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry in 1952. During his undergraduate years, Milstein was active in campaigns against the Peronist government's policies aimed at privatizing education and their more general impositions on universities and student life, and rose to be president of the student union. At the time, the government was clamping down on any political activity, and the atmosphere was particularly tense. In 1951, for example, a chemistry student, Ernesto Mario Bravo, was arrested and tortured for 20 days as a result of protesting against the government. His arrest sparked a major student strike. More than 150 strikers were arrested, and university administrators expelled the more prominent leaders of the student movement. In the end, however, Ernesto Mario Bravo was released. The student movement considered this a major achievement. 3 years later, student unrest erupted once again when the Peronist regime imposed even greater control over the media, education system, trade unions, and the legislative and the judiciary. In October of 1954, students joined workers striking against the then deep economic and social crisis and increasing unemployment. Shortly after, Milstein returned to the University of Buenos Aires from his several months of convalescence. Milstein met Celia Prilleltensky, Prilleltensky, Celia, that's Celia, Prilleltensky, Prilleltensky, a fellow chemistry undergraduate. Their first encounter was at the laboratory bench, where they found themselves working alongside each other. Celia not only shared Cesar Milstein's scientific interests, but was similarly an ardent student campaigner for free education. A year after their graduation in 1952, Milstein and Celia married. At the same time as getting married, Cesar Milstein began to look for a suitable doctoral supervisor. Initially, he sought to work with Professor Luis Leloir, Leloir, a distinguished Argentinian enzymologist. To this end, he visited Leloir's workplace, an old house in Buenos Aires. On arrival, he met what seemed to him an unassuming man carrying a basket. This turned out to be Leloir. Leloir? I'm struggling with that one a little bit. Having no space to take Milstein on, Leloir instead referred him to the Argentinian biochemist Professor Andres Stoppani, Stoppani. Milstein recalled that Stoppani was, quote, one of the few and perhaps the only full-time professor of the Faculty of Medicine in the University of Buenos Aires, perhaps the most important universities in Latin America, a full-time professor who probably had a salary of about the same order of magnitude as a janitor trying to do serious and honest research in a laboratory with no funds at all. End of quote. All these great people never getting the money. Stoppani advised Milstein to take some time off before he started his doctorate in view of the tense political climate which was hostile to students such as Cesar Milstein, who had actively campaigned against the Peronist government's policies in education. His advice encouraged Cesar Milstein to take a year-long honeymoon with Celia, exploring Europe. By 1954, the political environment had begun to improve, and Milstein began researching enzymes for a doctorate in biochemistry, although he had no funding, as there was none for students in this period. He was forced to support his studies by working half-days in the Laboratorios Leibniz, a clinical biochemistry laboratory. In later years, Cesar Milstein argued that this part-time job had taught him the value of organizing his time. During his doctoral research, Cesar Milstein had access to only the most basic equipment. Some idea of how poor the facilities were at the time can be seen from his recollections that Stoppani had to pay from his own meager salary for the pound of yeast needed from time to time in order to prepare the enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase, unquote. He recalled, quote, "We survived on what was inherited from the golden days, from the medical school, and with reagents justified by teaching requirements," unquote. The most precious piece of equipment in the department was a Warburg apparatus, which Stoppani did not allow anyone but himself to use. By the year 1955, the political situation in Argentina had improved still further, and with this, the conditions in Stoppani's department became slightly easier. This meant, for example, that the department was able to purchase a refrigerated centrifuge. The centrifuge proved useful to Milstein in his enzyme preparations. Nonetheless, problems remained. The nearest spectrophotometer, an instrument that Milstein needed for measuring enzyme activity, was located 3 blocks away from his department, and Milstein had to trek every day between departments carrying reagents and enzyme preparations. Early on in his doctoral studies, he came close to losing his position in the department when, in the process of making his enzyme preparation, he succeeded in consecutively breaking 3 of the department's 5 very expensive 5-liter flasks. Despite these hurdles, Milstein completed his doctoral research and was awarded a prize in 1957 by the Association Química Argentina for the best thesis in chemistry that year. His doctorate was an investigation of the enzyme dehydrogenase. He had focused his research on one of the enzyme chemical bonds known as a disulfide bridge. Between 1957 and 1959, Milstein would publish several papers with Stoppani arising from his doctoral research. The next section is called "The Relationship with Cambridge Begins." In 1958, funded by a British Council scholarship, Cesar Milstein joined Malcolm Dixon and Edwin Webb, W-E-B-B, at the Sir William Dunn School of Biochemistry in Cambridge. In part, the decision was influenced by the fact that Stoppani had worked with Dixon before the Second World War. Initially, Cesar Milstein had difficulty understanding what Dixon and Webb were saying because he lacked fluency in English. But with their advice, he set out to study the kinetics and heavy metal activation of the enzyme phosphoglucomatase. Phosphoglucomutase. PHOSPHOGLUCOMUTASE. Not bad. I don't think I did half bad there. This was inspired by Dixon's suggestion that Cesar Milstein follow up an odd observation made some years earlier in the department that doesn't just roll off the tongue, does it? Phosphoglucomutase required 2 metals for full activity, magnesium and a trivalent metal like chromium. Milstein was left to pursue his research on his own within Cambridge. The work was not without its pitfalls. Milstein lost his first large-scale enzyme preparation in an electric cold bath. According to Milstein, this was caused by the distraction of attending a champagne party to celebrate the awarding of a Nobel Prize to Fred Sanger in 1958. Sanger had been awarded the prize 2 weeks after Milstein's arrival in Cambridge. A central figure in the Cambridge biochemistry department, Sanger's achievement had been to show that proteins have a defined chemical composition. Despite his earlier disaster with enzyme preparation, within a year, Milstein's experiments on phosphoglucomutase had provided sufficient data for him to write up his research. This led to the award of a second doctorate, this time from Cambridge University. Based on this research, he published 3 papers. Contrary to contemporary opinion, Milstein discovered that the activation of phosphoglucomutase was caused by the displacement of heavy metals by magnesium. Prior to Cesar Milstein's finding, scientists believed the enzyme was activated by the heavy metals themselves. During this British Council fellowship in Cambridge, Cesar Milstein formed a strong bond with Sanger. At the same time, Sanger was a pivotal figure in the Department of Biochemistry, as he possessed the only functional pH meter. While an unassuming figure, Sanger was a dominant influence within the department. Cesar Milstein, for example, remembered a warning sign to the entrance of the department's high-voltage electrophoresis room reading, quote, "danger, high power," unquote, which was altered by someone in the department to read Sanger, high power, unquote. Cesar Milstein was quickly drawn to Sanger not only because of the equipment he possessed, but also by the fact that they shared the same research interests. They soon collaborated to define the active site of phosphoglucomutase and published a joint paper on this research. It appears with Milstein, C. Milstein and F. Sanger, with the title "An Amino Acid Sequence in the Active Center of Phosphoglucomutase," which was published, looks like 1960, in Biochemistry Journal. When it came time for Milstein to return to Argentina, Sanger offered to secure medical research council money for Milstein, to extend his time in Cambridge. Milstein, however, decided to return to Argentina to take up a position he had been offered prior to coming to Cambridge. And here's a photograph in 1980. Milstein, I think that's him on the left, and on the right, that's Fred Sanger. Next section, a new chapter in molecular biology in Argentina. In 1961, Cesar Milstein departed from Cambridge for the Instituto Malbrán, where he headed up a newly created Department of Molecular Biology in the National Institute of Microbiology. Celia, his wife, also had a post in the department. The return of the Milsteins to Argentina coincided with a period of reform in the country following the fall of Perón, when many academic scientists who had been sidelined or expelled during Perón's rule returned. They included Bernardo Haussay, Houssay, a physiologist who won the Nobel Prize in 1947, and Leloir, Leloir, again, the first mentor, who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1970. As head of the Department of Molecular Biology, Milstein had a wide range of responsibilities, from employing his carpentry skills to install a laboratory, to acting as a mentor to 25 young scientists and bringing bacterial genetics into the research orbit of the department. In addition to his day-to-day management of the department, he continued the research he had begun in Cambridge around phosphoglucomutase, developing techniques for studying the sequence of the enzyme and marking its active centers. He also started investigating another enzyme, alkaline phosphatase of bacteria. Much of this work was focused on understanding the enzyme's mechanism of action. His notable achievement at the time was elucidating the sequence around the active site of alkaline phosphate of bacteria with Zweig, Zweig. This they accomplished ahead of scientists in the United States. They published their results titled Zweig, Zweig, and Milstein, Zweig, a primary author, in the Biochimica et Biophysica Acta in 1963, titled, quote, "On the Nature of Phosphoenzyme Intermediate in the Phospho..." Oh, come on, give me a break. Phosphoglyceromutase reaction, unquote. In 1962, Cesar Milstein's life, like that of many other Argentinians, was thrown into turmoil as a result of a military coup. Most disturbingly for Milstein, Ignacio Piroski, Piroski, the director of his institute, was dismissed, as were many colleagues in Milstein's department who had defended Piroski. With this coup, persecution began to mount against both political dissenters and Jews in Argentina. This had major implications for Cesar Milstein. Being a Jewish name, authorities immediately associated him with communist activists. With four of his own staff, when four of his own staff were expelled from his department, he found himself no longer able to concentrate on his own scientific research, and he decided to resign from his position and return to Cambridge. He was just one amongst the many tens of thousands of intellectuals and scientists who left Argentina during the military regime. More historical background can be found on Milstein and the rise and fall of molecular biology in Argentina in the late 1950s and late 1960s in an article titled Pioneers and Victims, the Birth and Death of Argentina's First Molecular Biology Lab, written by Kreimer, Kreimer, and Lugones, Lugones. Looks like that was published in 2003. Milstein's career begins at the Laboratory of Molecular Biology. Milstein's departure from Argentina was facilitated by Fred Sanger. On hearing of Milstein's difficulties in Argentina, Sanger invited him to join at the Medical Research Council, the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology, where he now headed the protein chemistry division. And antibodies are proteins. Milstein arrived at the laboratory in 1963 on a 3-year contract paid for by the MRC. This was 1 year after the laboratory had moved into its own premises. For more information on Milstein's recollections of his early days, see written in 1982. It was titled by Milstein, Messing About with Isotopes and Enzymes and Antibodies. I'm sorry, that was written by Lennon. That was written by Whalen, and it was in the Leinen Lecture, Miami Winter Symposium Proceedings, probably also in 1982. So I think the next section is actually, the next section is not that bad. So we're going to do 2 and 3 here. Let me have a quick sip. One second. Okay, let's do the next section here. This one's not too early, not too long. Early antibody research. The quest to understand antibody diversity. Actually, I'm not going to be too much. Hopefully, this isn't too much of a bummer. I'm going to cut here because I think this next section is probably the section where a lot of people are going to want to start. I know a lot of people are not going to want to get into the older history, the setup of Milstein's early life. So with that said, we're going to break here. I may restart in a few minutes on Chapter 3. So just hang in there, guys. We'll be back in a few minutes. Chapter 3 coming up, story of Cesar Milstein and monoclonal antibodies.